the Overman Warrior Podcast.
Hi, it's Rich Hoffman here. There's been a lot of discussion about the recent interview Jesse Waters had with Jared Isaacman, the NASA administrator, as they were talking about the status of the Artemis program and what's going to happen after, what the timeline is for putting humans on the moon and keeping them there, not just landing there again, but to actually have a colony and to maintain a continuous presence on that colony, kind of like the International Space Station now. That's how it's going to look. And from an aerospace perspective, which I'm very passionate about aerospace, I work in the aerospace industry and understand kind of where the trend is headed. And I can tell you where it's been and where it's going. And the bottom line with NASA is they got themselves wrapped up in a bunch of DEI policies that essentially crippled them for a very long time, for decades at least. Kind of started with the Obama administration, 2012, 2013, and with the dismantling of the space shuttle program, and then telling all the NASA employees that the emphasis would be on having them learn and study Islamic contributions to science. It was a devastating period, and it really set them on a bad course. And I would say in aerospace in general, I've heard it for years. You hear it through the audit process and all the different the large manufacturers in aerospace, and kind of how they allowed themselves to be caught up in this DEI world. And I could have told everybody, and I have for all this time, that that was not going to be the future. And, the path that it was going down in a high regulatory environment where you essentially, you saw the cards got put on the table during COVID when the intent of all these policies were revealed, and the stay at home, work from home, social distancing. It was micromanagement of your employee culture. And that's, if you're just an administrator, you might be able to work at home in your bare feet and do a Teams call. But if you actually have to make stuff, physical things, and you have to have people making those physical things, that kind of environment didn't work. And that's certainly where NASA found itself, really not making anything, not going to the space. Too much time between Artemis missions when Trump finally came in and said, let's do this thing. And then he got thrown out in exile, and the 4 years it kind of stalled out. Not much happening because there was no real rate of resolution. So that's the environment that Jared Isaacman finds himself into by Trump returning back to the White House, and then really setting the moon missions on on a fast track. I was at a recent conference with a very large aerospace manufacturer, and they gave a presentation on what they thought the future of manufacturing was, which of course I explained to everybody that they were way off base, and that was not the trend at all. And that trend was they essentially are catching up to some of the Japanese techniques of the Toyota Kata system, and some lean ideas where everybody on the line, the assembly line, can pull a string and stop the line, stop manufacturing. If they see something wrong or something not right in their plan or processing, or the part they've received isn't 100% accurate to what it needs to be to the manufacturing standards, anybody in a process can pull the string. But the big difference is, and this is what I explained to everybody, big differences between a Japanese workforce and an American workforce, for instance, or a European workforce, for instance, is the Japanese work ethic is absolutely exceptional. They all work really hard. They work hard at everything they do. When you go buy a pack of gum at the grocery store or the convenience store, They bow deeply. They revere you. They give you your money, your change, very specifically. Put a lot of effort into everything they do, and that's a general cultural implement that you find everywhere in Japan. You don't see that in the United States. If anything, the trend has been to downplay seriousness, to become much more loose in the standards, and that comes from the unionized process. Labor unions have been devastating to the American workforce. It's not politically correct to say that kind of stuff because a lot of union people support Trump these days. But the bottom line is the American worker is not what the American worker has been in the past, and they certainly aren't what they should be in current manufacturing processes. So when you have these large manufacturers who are trying to mimic Japanese culture with like the Toyota manufacturing processes, they always fall short because in those Japanese cultures, they are crawling through broken glass to get the line back up and resolve the problem quickly. And in what's become of American cultures, by default, by that kind of liberalized thinking, implemented largely by Democrats and labor unions, is to use every problem as an excuse not to do work. So while somebody is resolving the problem, they turn on the TV or they start watching Netflix movies on their phones, and they use the work stoppage as an excuse to not do work and play a little bit and mess around with something they'd rather be doing. They're not plugged into the job or the task of fulfilling it. So that is not where aerospace or manufacturing in general is going in the United States, and it can't by necessity. And that's where the problems at NASA have been, and sort of what Jared Isaacman was alluding to as far as getting back to space. And the big controversy of whether or not the NASA administrator was avoiding answering Jesse Waters' question when he said, are we going to beat China to the moon and have a moon base on the moon before China does? And then the earpiece to his feed, Isaacman cut out, apparently. After the interview, it appears that was truly a technical problem. But at the time, it looked pretty suspicious that Isaacman just didn't want to answer the question. The truth of the matter is, China is way behind the United States right now. If we don't press it, they could catch up. Right now, they're not projected to go to the moon until 2030, plus or minus a year or two. So if NASA stays on track to keep condensing their timelines and get someone on the moon by 2028, that's very much a possibility. And then having a moon base infrastructure actually on the moon shortly thereafter is a primary concern. And I think under Jared Isaacman and the Trump administration in general, they definitely want this to happen before Trump leaves office after his final term here in 2028. It's a big priority for the Trump administration. We should have been at the moon a long time ago, though, and NASA has not been supported correctly, and it's been treated the way a lot of aerospace manufacturers have had to go, and that is to adopt a lot of these DEI policies that have completely destroyed manufacturing bases, and they're not what they used to be. And some of these manufacturers I'm talking about are trying to deal with their very radical labor unions who just don't want to work, and they look for every excuse not to, and then that cascades into the supply chain, so pretty soon everybody's copying the same behavior because they think the parental role of the ultimate manufacturers are going to set the pace for the next 10 years. And that just isn't how it's going to be. Instead, it's going to be the other way around. There's going to be a lot more press to resolve things much quicker. The leaner and meaner types are going to overtake the big, dominant, old, sluggish manufacturers. And NASA would consider itself one of those because it deals with all these sub-tier suppliers. And they all sort of follow the same kind of DEI policies. That's really harmed Boeing. Put Boeing out there because they've had a lot of trouble in the news. People are wondering why certain hires were in leadership positions, and really, when you trace it back, it's to do this fulfillment of this political sentiment that permeated the manufacturing sector, especially in aerospace. So the way it's going to be, kind of how Jared Isaacman was trying to say before his earpiece cut out, I don't think it was so much a gotcha. China's trying to catch up. They're spying on everything we're doing, but they're still a few years behind actually trying to do it. So the United States is definitely in the lead, and you need to keep it that way. You need to have a cadence where you're compressing these timelines, not yielding to them or adding to them. You're going to have to get to where you're doing 7 days a week, working holidays as innovator of aerospace and the adventure of flight. Whether it's within Earth's atmosphere or outside it, it's the same adventure that requires innovation and a lot of grit that was known for America's manufacturing base in the beginning. And you got to get back to that mentality. We got to get back to that mentality. That's where it's headed, and that's where NASA is going to have to be if it wants to lead this thing. And I think it does. I mean, SpaceX is pressing on them, Blue Origin's pressing on them. Firefly's pressing. The competitive commercial people are out there really driving this thing. And NASA is supposed to be a leader in it, and they have not been because they adopted all these wrong policies, and they put people in charge for the last decade or so that were more committed to the study of Islamic contributions to science and not actually building spacecraft, advanced spacecraft, and getting them into off-world settlements. So the timeline for China is that they're about 2 years behind the United States, and they are aggressively pushing to catch up. But the lead for the United States is really too great as long as we stay on it. But if you get into this overly cautious approach to aerospace and take the adventure and innovation out of it, the working around the clock, working 7 days a week, even on holidays, and not complaining about it, and looking for a coffee break every time a line goes down, or looking for some worker to pull the cord to stop the line because they're looking for an excuse not to perform, and then blaming safety on lack of performance. That's been an abused trait that's really hurt the industry, and it's kind of the tongue-in-cheek on this whole NASA thing. And can we keep the Chinese from catching us and getting on the moon first, and then having a settlement, had the first moon base? It needs to have an American flag on it. By political necessity. It's a critical element. And in order to get there, you've got to get a lot less cumbersome in the manufacturing will and the engagement from the workforce. And I just recently toured the NASA facility, and I can tell you that they are behind the times. They really, middle of the night, 9 o'clock on a Saturday night, they weren't working as diligent as they need to be, and they need to have full parking lots. They need to have a lot of people working around the clock to get to the moon before China does. Because you can bet the Chinese, they'll run themselves into very unhealthy conditions to get to the moon. And when you have all these safety administrators out there saying, but is it worth human lives to sacrifice just so you can be on the moon first? Actually, it's a war. And in war, if you have to charge a machine gun turret to take the beach, you do it. If you have to achieve a military objective, you do it. And this is a military political objective, being to the moon first, and then setting the terms for which the moon is settled. And every other celestial system that's out there. And if NASA wants to lead it, they're going to have to lead it by work ethic. And that's the kind of the undercurrent on the whole Jesse Waters drama. I don't think that Isaacman played a Ferris Bueller's Day Off and said, well, I can't hear you. I don't really understand what's going on. Why the earpiece is working just fine. And he didn't want to just answer the question. I think there was an actual technical malfunction. I think Isaacman's a pretty straight up guy, even though he is an administrator for a reason. And you got to control narratives when you're in those positions. But the overall message is you have to work hard to beat your competition. Competition's China. And the very first moon base that there needs to be, not just landing on the moon again, but having a moon base that is a habitat that's sustainable and a permanent residence for humanity off planet. That needs to happen before 2030, and to do that, it's going to be quite quite a challenge, and it means that the American manufacturing base has to get jiggy with it and get a lot more aggressive, and take some lessons from SpaceX, who do work around the clock all the time, and they're very engaged and very passionate about their work. And that's what you have to cascade to. All the suppliers to that industry have to get on it. And the methods of the past that were going to be regulation heavy and have a leniency towards DEI policies, which we would then call woke politics, have crippled manufacturing sectors everywhere in the United States, and the lessons had to be hard learned. And now we're in a place where we have to completely get back to the basics and dump all that stuff, not at the expense of health and safety, but by being good and diligent. And in that regard, your health and safety go up, because you have much more engaged people who aren't falling off stools all the time because they're half asleep watching movies on their phones because they're waiting for their work to resume, and they're waiting for people who are salary staff who are only working a minimum of 8 hours a day and spending half the day looking for their next job on LinkedIn, that aren't very engaged to solve the problem for them. Meanwhile, they're playing around and not doing work that's necessary for the furtherance of technical innovation in the aerospace market. NASA, if they want to be a leader, needs to get on the 7-day a week, work during the holidays, all hours of the day, filled parking lots at 3 o'clock in the morning, and hey, their bosses should have to drag them away to a coffee break. And that's the kind of right stuff that's going to get you up on the moon before China, stay ahead of China and everybody else, and have a very successful moon base in a reasonable amount of time before the Chinese figure it out. It is a race, and the race is necessary, and it's going to require the right stuff from the American workforce, which they've forgotten about over these last couple decades of devastating political interruptions that have destroyed the core foundations of what success was in those industries. And it's time to dust off the right stuff and get back at it. And that starts with American manufacturing to fulfill the aerospace market, so the adventure of space travel can occur at a level that is unprecedented in all history. And that's what we're talking about here. And I think that's where Jared Isaacman's mind is. And I'm looking forward to a lot more from him, the Trump administration, and those that come after. And that's another reason why Republicans need to make sure they win the White House after Trump's gone, so we can keep these policies of adventure going and complete a resurrection of the American workforce in an engagement policy that it has long since forgotten, and get back to the grit and toughness that defined it in the first place. That's what's going to make NASA great again. It's Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you haven't read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to the Business, I think you'll love it. Talk about those things a lot in that book. And it's very true, even more true now than it was when I wrote it back in 2021. It's definitely the path to a successful 2030 and beyond. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.
Thank you for listening.